Welcome back to Big Asian Energy. I have so much excitement with today's guest, Gabi Koyenov, who is a New York-based licensed marriage and family therapist and the founder of the Men's Therapy Studio. Now, I'm usually already excited just off of that alone because I think the Men's Therapy Studio work the work that the mission behind it is so fascinating all in of itself. But not only that, today we get to bring in a different perspective around the topic of what it means to be Asian American. And the reason for that is because when I first met Gabi, I did not assume that he was Asian American until he pointed out that he is actually from Central Asia. And his background is so fascinating because of it. Originally he's a Bukharian. Am I getting that right?
That's
Bukharian?
perfect. Yeah,
Okay,
Bukharian.
I'm glad. Who is from Uzbekistan and Jewish. And it's such a different perspective in how it is that we view what that definition of Asian American is. He was raised in Queens by immigrant parents and experienced cultural shifts attending Jewish high schools. And that's where it led him to pursuing master's degrees in marriage, family therapy, professional counseling. And by the way, he graduated summa cum laude, so I want to point that out. But more importantly is his therapeutic approach, which is it's not just about doing your usual talk therapy, but it actually blends traditional methods and more innovative work so that the work dives deeper. On his podcast, he also talks about the engagements between mental health, spirituality, and the human experience, especially around the topics of self-discovery. So first and foremost, thank you so much for being on the show, Gabi. It's so great to have you.
John, I am so honored and thank you so much. And your energy is fantastic. And I just want to shout out your book, Big Asian Energy. It's been very relatable. I really have been enjoying it so far. And I'm excited to get through it.
Oh man, I'm so excited. And by the way, just a shout out for Gabi's show, which I will be on
Yes.
sometime in the near future. We'll dive into the book and talk more about it. Because as soon as we connected, it was just like, boom, okay, we have so much to talk about, so many things to dive into. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Okay, so first and foremost, Gabi, can you give us a little bit of a background? Because we don't usually think
Yeah.
Central Asian as commonly colloquially part of the Asian American stereotypes or image.
Yeah.
How has that influenced your own self-identity and your views?
Okay, such a fascinating question, and thank you so much for asking me. Just firstly, I think the group in Central Asia, and especially like amongst Bukharians, the look is very diverse. Like you have some people that look kind of East Asian, some people that look maybe like Southeast Asian or more like Indian, some that look very European, some that look Arabic. So it's a big mix, and part of the reason is because that was in the path of the Silk Road. So people over the past 1500 to 2000 years have been like moving there and building life there, and people from all over the world ended up in Central Asia because of that. But coming to America and being a first generation immigrant parents, my parents came in the 80s and they both had me in their 40s. Like my mom was 40 and my dad was like 45. Yeah. And dude, it's a massive, massive culture shock and generational gap between like you're talking about these old school Central Asian people that it was also part of the former USSR, and so they were influenced by communism and like that mindset, and then coming to America where it's totally different. Like just a few examples, um, and this is also funny. I'm a father now, and it's like I love my child. I love her so much. But like the level of sacrifice that I think my parents were able to do for me is something that I will never be able to do for my child. You know what I mean? Like giving up everything. And to get into some examples, it's like my parents literally pinched every penny. I say this all the time to people, which is crazy. I don't think my father ever spent like $100 on himself, like more than $100, like at a time, to buy any clothes or go to a restaurant or anything. He's
Hmm.
he's just never done that. Like everything he saved to put me and my siblings through an education, and yeah, and to buy the house and everything he's doing. And it's crazy because compared to my in-laws that have that each of them, probably like my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, have probably made more money than both of my parents, like individually. They're not in the position that my parents are, in the sense of like they saved up every single penny to buy some houses, you know what I mean? And sacrifice so that they could put us through this type of
Mm.
education. Like, I would never be able to do that for my child. Like, on the other hand, I never really had a conversation with my parents. You know, it was never real like connection.
Mm.
Like they talked, of course, but there was never like, I don't know, how are you? How's school going? Aside for just like checking on grades, you know, making sure that that's on point. You know, there was never really any real connection, and I think that's probably because of the cultural barrier. Sorry, I know that that's kind of all over the place, so
No,
it's really
no, it
hard.
was
Yeah,
it's so relatable, and it's such an interesting thing because was when we were first started chatting, my first question was how, do you feel connected to the Asian American, especially that the immigrant of Asian
yeah,
American children experience. And everything you're describing so far has just been hitting all the points of what it was like. I feel so related to that. My parents, same thing. They sacrificed everything, their community, their background, everything like that to
yeah.
give me and my sibling a better life. And I don't have kids yet, but I definitely feel that same thing. It's like, will I be able to do that for my kids? I don't know. I'm like, move to a new country
Yeah,
with virtually nothing, start over. That is an incredible sacrifice.
exactly. Yeah, and it's so crazy because it's funny. I always thought growing up as a kid, I'll definitely be a better parent than my parents. You know,
Mm,
and in certain ways, yeah, I'm showing up for my child in a way that like my parents and whatever, my child is still a baby. So,
mm,
it's obviously different, but like, in the level of really trying to care for her personally and be like on a more like sit down and play with her and like stuff like that, which are things
mhm,
my parents didn't really necessarily even have the opportunity to do, even if they wanted to, because they were busy working, you know?
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so
Absolutely. What
yeah,
what was it like for you growing up in North America?
dude, it's bizarre. It's so bizarre. There's a, like, I think I was telling you before, there's a Bukharian community in Queens. But,
Mhm.
aside for that, there isn't, you probably haven't really heard of them in general. It's kinda, like, very small. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
will absolutely ignore. That's right. Admit my
yeah,
massive ignorance that I'm hoping to learn more about. First
yeah.
and foremost, give me a little background here. You say Bakarian, and what exactly does that identity mean? Where is it from? And do you still find yourself relating to that as a main identifier?
Dude, that's a fantastic question. So, Bukharian specifically refers to Jews from Central Asia, so
Mhm.
Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, like, in that general area, and, I think in America as a group, it's kind of funny. There are certain things that are very stereotypically what you might call like an Asian experience, and then there are things that are very different. Like I think you were
Mm,
mentioning in your book how a lot of Asian Americans have this idea of like humility and not having a set of bravado. By the
mm,
Bukharian culture, very much it's very much the opposite. There's very much like a need to show like a sense of success, and then that
mm,
comes off in people overspending on weddings and like crazy, man. It's it's really bizarre. And showing off in the sense of like buying nicer houses. My parents really were not like that. My parents were really just in the more like saving money kind of side of it. But that is an experience that a lot of Ukrainians have. But then it's
mm,
like, dude, it's so funny to get into. It's like education super important. Teacher's always
mhm.
right.
Mm.
Like if you're getting B's, like you might get the slipper. It's like it's like you know what I mean? It's like yeah,
I'm
it's
glad
intense
that
like that.
that part certainly crossed that cultural identity.
Right, right. Um,
So relatable.
yeah, right. Like food also being a big uniting factor and connecting.
Mm,
Um, yeah, like listen, multi-generational households. My grandma
mhm,
lived with us after my
mhm,
my parents moved
mhm,
here, and that respect for elders. And it's so funny. It comes across. Um, it's very interesting how I personally experience it, and I think it's interesting how it affects a community. Like I feel like a lot of people when they're coming to therapy in the Asian
mm,
American experience, like are much more likely to look at me as an authority, as like, oh, please tell me what to do, as opposed to
mm,
like, oh, I'm here to reflect, help you figure it out. Like you're an expert in your own life. They don't have that
mm,
self confidence and that internal trust.
mm,
But then in other ways, they're more in touch with themselves too, in the sense of like, I feel like there's more of a spiritual connection as well, and more of like an understanding of being part of something greater, as opposed to, I think in Western culture, we very much view ourselves as like different from nature and different from reality. So I don't know. It's hard to kind of put these into words. I tried to make a whole YouTube series about it at one point, but it's very challenging. Yeah,
I'll bet. There's so much complexity to it. Do you
exactly. Yeah.
get a lot of
Yeah.
clients who are from that community?
So yeah, I have a few clients from my own community, and then also from the greater Asian American community, and then also like regular, white people and all sorts of people. Yeah,
Everyone else, basically.
yeah, yeah, everyone else,
Is there
exactly.
is
Yeah,
there anything that you
and
find you mentioned before that when your clients come to reach out to you,
mhm,
this is something that they do bring up, which is they see you more as this authority figure rather than someone who is there to sit with you and help you process your thoughts and
right.
emotions. How has that influenced your practice when you're working with specifically Asian American clients, either from Uzbekistan or from the greater Asian American community?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very interesting. I have to kind of catch myself because as a therapist, um, I think my biggest job is really to be a reflection board for the client that's coming in. Like I really
Mhm.
am not sharing personal information with them, trying not to at least. Um, and it's very much just about them and their experience. And I'm
Mhm.
not the authority in their life, and I can't tell them what to do. Even if I wanted to, it would be ethically wrong. Like that's not my job. My job is really to help them figure it out for themselves. And if there's like a some type of mental health crisis, help them navigate out of that. Like if they're depressed or anxious, so like giving them tools if I need to or whatever, mindfulness training, like mindfulness exercises, whatever that might look like, or CBT
Mhm.
exercises. So that's really more of the position. And it's very
Mhm.
interesting. Like sometimes I'll get, oh, what should I do with my partner? Just tell me what to do kind of thing. And then
Mhm.
it's really just like, well, everyone's experience is different. And I can't necessarily just tell you exactly what to do, but let's talk about it. What do you think would be some good ideas? So stuff like that. And
Mm.
it's really just bringing it back to and reminding them. And this is so funny. I get this all the time, especially after working with a client for a while. I'll get all the time like, oh, Gabi, I couldn't have done this without you. Like, thank you so much. Like, you really helped me. Like, you were amazing. And then I really like have to say, like, I was just here to help you reflect. Like you really did all the work. Like any any credit that like any results that you've seen in your life, like that's all you. Like I really didn't do anything in your life. Like you really did it. I was just here to help you reflect, you know?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Right.
that influence, that felt sense that you were there to help me guide my way through is also, I think, such a part of like that respect for people in
Mhm.
that position of authority. I do
Yeah.
see that personally, when I work with people, I do find that sometimes when I work with non-Asian clients, there's this natural assumption that we're more equals. We're just chatting things out.
Mhm. Right.
Whereas I do find that a lot of time when I work with Asian clients, like there is a little bit more of like, no, 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 I'm just here to listen to you, to tell me what
Right.
to do. What do I do
Yeah.
next?
Yeah.
And
Right.
I've always wondered about this. Like, is this part because I also went through this. When I was working
Mhm.
with coaches and therapists and stuff like that, in the very beginning, I was just like, well, you're the doctor. You you tell me what to do. I
Right.
was not used to them going back, well, what would you do though?
Mhm.
Like, what do you mean?
Right.
What I'm just waiting for what I would do is I would wait for you to tell me what to do and I would go and do it. And then
Like, that's
come
why I'm
back and
here.
ask, did I do it
Right.
right? Am I a good enough client? Did I get an A on being therapy? Like
Dude, that's
oh
so funny,
man.
man. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
where does that come from? I feel like that's such a deep part of us, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for
Honestly,
me
that's all the disclaimers, of course, right? Like we're
yeah, of
not
course, yeah.
we're not a monolith. This is not assuming everyone. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly, exactly. Well said. For me, I think part of where it comes from is like my parents just saying like, okay, you have to listen to your elders all the time, like that constantly being reinforced. Your teacher's always right. Like, dude, I've had experiences where my teachers were dead wrong. And I do want to talk about this a little bit. Like dealing with the racism
Yeah.
is bizarre. Like even recently, by the way. Okay, so if you live in Queens, there's a good chance you might know what Bukharian is. Definitely, if you're Jewish, you probably definitely know who they are, but
Mhm.
who we are. But basically, even just recently, I went to a friend's engagement party. He's not Bukharian. He's a white Jewish person. So I went to a party. After the party, us and a couple of friends we went back to one of their houses, and they had a ping pong table and we were playing ping pong. And then the friend and the fiance came over, and we're playing ping pong. And then suddenly the fiance is like, "Oh, are you Bukharian?" And then I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, you don't look Bukharian at all." And then I was like, "Oh, what does that mean?" And she says, she says, I'm like, no, I said, what do Bukharians look like? And she said,
Mhm.
oh, like barbers, right? And this is a horrible, isn't that
Oh
crazy?
my god,
Yeah, yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah.
Seriously?
Seriously, I'm serious. Yeah, and that's a crazy, crazy, crazy stereotype. And this is the funny thing, dude. And all the time, like if I'm eating by another person, like if I'm staying by another person's house, they invite me over for dinner. I've gotten the comment of like, if they're talking about Bukharians, They might say like, "Oh, he's one of the good ones," or like, "Oh, you don't talk like a Bukharian." That happens all the time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, it's bizarre. And this is what's so crazy. People probably don't know, but a lot of Bukharians, when they came to America, dude. So I'll give you a little more background. My dad is in Uzbekistan. He was an aerospace engineer, right? Like he studied in Moscow a little bit, and he studied in a university in Tashkent.
An actual rocket scientist.
Yeah, an actual rocket scientist, right? But he comes to America. This is my dad, so you can imagine he's kind of like a Asian background, Jewish, and from like Soviet Soviet era Russia. So it's kind of like, dude, he's good at math, and like and like he comes to America, he gets his first job, and he stays in that job for till he retires. You know what I mean? And they
Mm.
were underpaying him wildly, dude. Like, and it's so bizarre. Like they were paying him something between I forget the exact number, but something like $30,000. I don't think he ever got a raise, dude. And he stayed in this job the whole time,
Oh
working
my
as an
gosh.
engineer in a what's it called, a power tool company. Like he would design the power tools, and it's crazy. It's crazy. It's like what a step down. And that's the type of man he is. He's like nose down, grind, like set of responsibility. I committed to this job. I'm doing it 9 to 5 every day. Like he's just very regimented. And what's so powerful also, like one, and this is very different, but one example that I really take from my dad is like the world could be crumbling around him. He's gonna do whatever he he needed to do that day. He's just like, it's not even gonna bother him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like no sense of
Mm-hmm.
like nothing can stop him, you know?
Hmm.
And it's like that was
Yeah.
him. Like didn't matter, he was underpaid, had to make money, just go to the same job every shows up. And that's what he was like for us too, honestly, growing up, where it's like this is like, I'm getting a little bit emotional even talking about it, but like anytime I had a nightmare, my dad would always come,
Mm.
and he would come to the room and stay in my bed. Like anytime we were sick, like he brought us tea. If I threw up, this is kind of gross, but like if I threw up, he literally would catch the throw up with his hands. It's so gross, but like so that it wouldn't get on the carpet. But
That's an incredible amount of love.
yeah, 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 exactly. And it's like it's so funny because he's not verbal about it. But that's like
Mhm.
really how he expresses it. Like he just really showed up, paid for
Mm.
things, and when he could, he was there totally. So it's like, um, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Anyways,
beautiful.
but going back to
And you no, no, yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna ask. Yeah, first and foremost, I do wanna just take a moment and give that acknowledgement to your dad because we need more fathers, I think, that are that loving and can be so present with their kids. I think that's something that we don't always get to see. So many of us, we have parents, sure, they're not the most communicative in their words, in how they express love. I think that's a learned practice that
yeah,
every generation gets to learn and refine. But I do see that degree of, you mentioned sacrifice, that physical action of being there, literally holding you through whatever it is you're going through. That is something that is absolutely incredible.
yeah,
Now, that being said, I want to come back to that previous thread we're talking about as well, which
yes,
is you
right.
mentioned the experiences of racism that you witnessed for yourself as well as for your dad. And in particular, it's not just about the Bukharian part, because you mentioned that being from this, there's a wide range of how you see and how you present and how people might see you. What was it like for you growing up, and were there any times that you felt racism in particular, either from your own community, from the Asian American community, or from others? I'm curious around that piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And so continuing that thread, the reason that lady said that you like I would think Bukharians look like a barber is because a lot of Bukharians yeah, it's so crazy, right? When they came to America, so they couldn't necessarily keep their degree or like they had to take a step down. So they did like cash
Oh.
jobs, so like cutting hair,
Mm.
jewelry, um like things like handiwork, things that they could do for kind of like cash jobs, and that became almost like a stereotype. Like honestly, there's
Mm.
a good chance, it's probably true. There's a good chance that if you live in New York City and you have a barber you really like, he's probably like there's a 50% chance he's Bukharian, probably. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating, but like it's probably true. Um yeah. So that's kind of like maybe a little bit where the stereotype comes from, but it always bothers me so much. And as a high schooler, like as a teenager, I used to really just get like very angry. And then at a certain point, I wouldn't really say anything and I would kind of just ignore it and maybe even like placate a little bit. And now I just kind of like, what do you mean by that? And I don't even know if that's the right way to go, but like I'll call it out
Mm.
too. Like I'll like
Mhm.
when I was at that other person's house and I said I'm Bukharian and they said like, "Oh, he's one of the good ones." I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" You
Mm.
know? And then they like kind of commented a little bit. I'm like, "That's kind of racist. I wouldn't say that if I were you." You know? So I really like
No, I think education is so important around that.
yeah,
I wish that
exactly.
people do call it out more, I think, especially casually. I think that's the really
Right.
most common thing. One thing that I always love sharing with people is like the easiest way whenever you hear somebody's, saying something that's,
Yeah.
somewhat quote unquote casual racism, really it's just racism, there's
Right.
no difference. It's just asking
Yeah,
them,
exactly.
like, what do you mean? I love that question, right? What do you mean by that? Can you explain that? And I think
Right.
when people go into that explanation, they sometimes catch like, oh, it's just a joke, and being like, oh, okay, sorry, I don't think I get it. What's the joke? Like
Right.
that's when they go, oh shit, right. That joke had this connotation. I wasn't even aware when I was saying it, but what it meant underneath is so powerful, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. And I really think that is the right way to go, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I love that. So
yeah.
how okay, you had a great congrats on getting a great dad.
Thank you. Thank you.
How did that and your experiences growing up lead you into therapy and especially around men's work?
That's such a dude, first of all, that's such a good question, and I'll tell you, like, I'm able to sit down and think about my father and reflect on him and really understand the good that he gave me in my life that I'm so blessed and grateful for, and like I said, again, like, the level of consistency that he had, I really don't think I could
Mm,
do for my daughter, like, just physically, it would be impossible for me. So it's really something I could look at and admire, but honestly, for a long time, I didn't really even understand my father. My mother, I didn't even talk about my mother at all. She's also awesome, but like I didn't understand my parents at all. Like the cultural gap was really real. And for a while, like it maybe even felt to me like I don't even think my parents love me, because they didn't communicate in the way that I, as like an American kid, thought
mhm,
that I would be loved. You know what I mean?
mhm,
And it
mhm,
really took kind of getting older and reflecting and my own therapy and work to really recognize that like the level that like the level of love that they have for me and care for me is so profound, and like it's different. They came from a different culture, they have a different background. And it's like this is maybe like another like really bad example, but my parents have no sense of privacy for me. Like they could just walk into my room or my house, like
The
no care in the world,
boundaries is not a
no
strong Asian
boundaries.
trait.
Yeah, no boundaries. But it's like things like that, like, you don't respect me. Like, that's what I would think, like, you
Oof,
don't actually care about me because it's like you don't care about my boundaries. But it's not that, you know? It's kinda like they grew up in a totally different culture where that wasn't a thing. And it's like
yeah.
or it's like, "Why are you hitting me with a slipper for a bad grade? Like, what's up with that?" Right? Like, but it's just like, dude, like,
Yeah.
that's their it's not coming from hate or non-love, right?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Because you in their view, right, it's that you being punished teaches you, whatever lessons that's supposed to teach you will help you succeed, and that's probably what that thought process is,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
exactly.
would personally say from my own experience, at least, that I hear a
Yeah.
lot.
No, that's probably exactly right?
Mhm.
And I think it takes a certain level of real processing because the anger that somebody might feel, excuse me, the anger that somebody might feel in that situation from being treated in that way is real and valid and it needs to be processed. And then once a person comes to that level, like they could really also recognize the incredible, good and love that their parents had for them in their own way. And that's not necessarily going to be everyone's experience, but that is going to be the case for a lot of people. And it's
Mhm.
tough. And your question before was about how that affected me to becoming a therapist, right? Like that upbringing. So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
specifically, not just a therapist, but the connection to men's work, I think
right.
is particularly I'm curious about. But yes, both.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I have to go back to high school to really share this.
Let's go.
Um,
Let's go.
yeah. So, as I'm saying, Bukharians are different from, regular American Ashkenazi Jews. That's what they're called. Ashkenazi usually means a European Jew. So
Mhm.
that's in America now, let's say. So I went to an Ashkenazi high school, and that's different from Bukharian. And in some meaningful ways, really meaningful ways, in many cases. But basically, my parents sent me to this Ashkenazi high school because it had a really good reputation. and it was supposed to be like a really solid education. The thing is that a lot of Ashkenazim have a reputation, have like a stereotype in their mind about Bukharians that they're more troublemaker type kids, or like just rougher, less respect for, you know, boring like authority or whatever. That's often like kind of the reputation. And dude, this is the craziest thing. Before high school, in elementary school, I was the nicest kid, man. I was so sweet. I never caused any trouble. I never got in trouble, you know? Had really solid grades, like always, like a really, 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 really good kid. Dude, coming to high school, I even had some teachers like call me the N-word. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Isn't that insane?
No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, dude, it's crazy. And other Bukharians, like they didn't. I'm trying to think, like not necessarily did anyone be like, "Oh, you're an N word," but like that, yeah, like that type of like maybe like behind closed doors, you know, or like they might say like, "Oh, he's." But yeah, that situation has happened to me, you know, where I've been called an N word. So it's pretty
Oh,
crazy.
wow.
But this is the funny thing, also. I think back in that time, we were a little bit more being first generation kids, especially with the other Bukharians. Um, so for example, my best friend Yar, who was in that high school too with me, he was probably the most charismatic, most amazing, like brilliant person that I've ever gotten to know, in the sense that like he just knew how to own and like operate a crowd. So we were very into like Russell Peters and Cat Williams as comedians back in the day. And we kind of thought of ourselves like we grew up on the streets. You know what I mean? It's like, even maybe this is like a little bit, maybe this is something I shouldn't admit, but like, you know, we ourselves like would use the N word in like the way that like we were calling each other like, oh, he's my brother kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Not like the racist way that the teachers had said it, or other
Yep.
kids. But yeah. Anyways, where am I going with this? So basically, that dynamic of just seeing how, like, wait a second, these people saw me in a certain way and they're thinking of me in this type of box, and how that kind of like affected me, and seeing people from different cultures and different like generations and stuff and how they acted kind of differently, it really made me fascinated by how and why people are different. And that got me very, very, very obsessed. And also at the same time, that's what helped me see the Matrix, I think, for the first time, in the sense of like, these teachers see me as something that I'm totally, totally not, and I don't even get it. And it just made me
Mhm.
like see for the first time almost that like there's like a social framework of like expectations that you don't have to live by. Like there are no rules. You don't have to live by these rules. And I don't know what it was about that experience of just like being seen as something that I totally am not. And like it just kind of woke me up to something that just made me realize like, hey, wait a second, why is he like that? Why does he have that thought? Right. Or like this vision. And it really made me question. It's like, why are people that are happy happy? Why are people that are sad not? Right? Like, but how
Mm.
do people become successful or not successful? And like throughout life, like why do some people have friends and are very popular and some people don't? Like it just all those questions really started bubbling in my mind. And there was a really great school counselor at my school at the time that I really connected with. I'm actually seeing him again at this time in my life, but like yeah, like every few years we like we pick up therapy again and just
Wonderful.
like work on some stuff. Yeah, it's always been a great experience. So, yeah, he really also helped me work through a lot of my own things. And this friend Yar, dude, it was really a journey. So it just made me fascinated by people, and I just became obsessed and like knew I wanted to become a therapist. And dude, I love this. I love this work. I love the meaning that it brings me of just like actually sitting down and
Mhm.
helping somebody make a deep, deep, deep change in their life that is
Mm.
helps them just be functional and happy. Right? Like it's so
Mm.
meaningful to me.
Mhm. How, as you became a therapist, and reflecting on your own journey and the past and your own identity and culture experiences, etc., were there anything that stood out for you that you look back now and you kind of realize, oh wow, like I didn't realize that my background had this influence on me, or that being Bukharian had this influence on me now as an adult looking back.
That is such a good question. And I think a few of the biggest ways that I like see being Bukharian and I'm so grateful for it is I think there's a certain I don't know what the word is exactly, but like there's a certain connection that I feel to a community that I think a lot of people
Mm.
don't necessarily have. And even greater than that, I feel like there's almost like a sense. My parents will say this like all the time, like, oh, everything happens for a reason. Like if something bad
Mhm.
happens, like, oh, it's part of like a plan or whatever. And this is actually fascinating. There's a certain experience of belief in God that Bukharian has versus like an Ashkenaz person. Like I think an Ashkenaz person, and Ashkenaz again meaning like a European Jew, might come from it from much more of a Western angle. Like you see all these debates and like, oh, does God exist, and all these debates,
Hmm.
dude. The A Bukharian person looks at it as like this is a felt experience. This is something that is
Hmm.
just like, how do I know God is real? It's just it's here. Like can't you like you just feel it. There's a certain like base of like God is not some intellectual concept. It's like a feeling and an experience, and it's like all around us, and like everything happens for a reason kind of thing. And it's a little hard to really explain because it's an experience. It's hard to
Hmm.
put into words. And it's like I do feel a sense of like I'm connected. I'm part of everything. I'm not just like a like separated or I think that's like a very individualistic kind of Western thing of just like feeling us as like different from nature, different
Hmm.
from everyone. Like we're somehow
Hmm.
different. Like, dude,
Yeah.
like everything, we're all connected. Like we're all, you
Yeah.
know, yeah,
It it's
part
a
of this.
fascinating thing. I have never considered this, but of course there's, different separations in this, but the
Yeah.
experience of being a Central Asian Jew versus being a Western or Western European Jew and that community shift. Do you feel like the two groups are well accepting of each other? Like what is that experience like?
So, okay, that's a fantastic question. My wife is
I
Ashkenaz.
don't know how deep we're going to dive into this, by
That's,
the way. So
yeah,
let
right.
me know if there's anything that you're like, oh my gosh, this is a huge political issue or something.
Dude, ask me
I
anything.
have known
Yeah.
nothing about it.
This is, I guess, somewhat of a political issue in the community, and I think it's a big issue. And I think the worst part about it is the gaslighting. I would say, of just
Oh.
like dude, like I'm telling you, high school, I've heard experiences of like a teacher call me an N-word, right? Like I've had experiences, or like to a Bukharian friend of mine. It's happened more than once, which is crazy. I'm not saying like it happens every day, but it's happened like when a teacher was upset or something. Like it's happened, and it's
Mm.
crazy. Dude, when I was dating, like in the like while I was single, before I got married, we call it dating, right? So like you're kind of like in the scene of trying to get match made,
Mhm.
working with
Yep.
matchmakers to try and like find somebody that would be your partner. Dude, the
Is
amount of
that
times,
so? You hold on a second, just to check.
yeah,
So I'm aware of the matchmaker thing, but of course,
sure,
that's
yeah,
probably more prominent. Did you work with a matchmaker? What was
yeah,
that experience like, as opposed to
yeah.
more westernized ideas of dating?
Dude, oh my god, it's such a good question.
This
Um,
is so this is so fascinating. I'm like, tell me all the things. Okay.
No, I'm glad you enjoy it. Yeah, so there's a matchmaker in the Jewish circles. We call that person a shadchan, which means that
Uh
it
huh.
just means matchmaker. So,
Yeah.
yeah, basically, you would write a resume, even like a piece of paper, just describing a little bit who you are and your family background and stuff. And then they would kind of set you up through giving either their resume and whatever. It's the whole like setup process. And then you would date typically. And we're talking about like like the more religious circles you go, the shorter that dating span is. But it could be something from like 1 month, which is extremely short, to like, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, depending on how religious a person is. But, anyways, while I was in that scene, dude, the amount of times an Ashkenaz girl would just say, "Oh no," because he's Bukharian. Last two letters, my last. They didn't even meet me. Dude, they just got the piece of paper. They didn't know me. They didn't know anything about me. It would just be like, "Oh no, he's Bukharian. I don't want to go out with him," or whatever. And it's really, really, really shocking and egregious. And I would literally get that response. But then when I would point it out, they would be like, "No, no, no." Like meaning when I would point it out to the matchmaker or like a
Yeah.
rabbi or something. Yeah, dude, it would just
Yeah.
be the gaslighting would be what's like really intense. Like the racism is there and it's so clear, and it's just like the denial of it. That's what actually is really like bothersome about it,
Of
you know?
course.
Yeah.
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 I can't even imagine. I mean, in it, you would think that dating regularly will be bad enough, but to have to go
Yeah.
through that
Exactly.
from the perspective of a matchmaker, that sounds horrible.
It's really tough, man. It's really tough. But this is the funny thing. My wife is Ashkenaz, so like we kind of are, I guess, mixed relationship.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Is
she
that
was open
common?
minded. Not so common. Not so common. It's becoming more common as time goes on. But dude, it's just interesting. It's very interesting. And my daughter is like the most beautiful person ever because she has like that, the mix of genes. Uh,
I'm not. I don't have any kids yet, but I'm very looking forward to having a mixed kid myself.
yeah, yeah. I gotta show you a
I have
picture.
I have heard people say that
Yeah,
mixed kids. Because mixed genetic mixing has supposedly the
Yeah,
theory I've heard, right? I don't know. I'm
sure.
not a scientist around that, but it's that like the genetic diversity oftentimes produces why it is that a lot of people are like, oh, like mixed kids are so cute.
Yeah,
100%
yeah.
feel that.
Dude, yes, yes, yes. Oh man. And
um,
then this is also the funny thing though. Can I go back a little bit?
let's do
When
it.
I would when I would meet a girl, like so they had singles events also. When I would meet a
Yeah.
girl and then they would kind of no, I'm behind. I would get somewhat fetishized. You know what I mean? I would get somewhat like, oh, you're so like kind of exotic looking or whatever. And it's so crazy. You know, it's so bizarre. Yeah.
That is fascinating. You get
Yeah.
fetishized as a
I would get
Bukharian.
fetishized. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And it's funny also, I
wow.
think if
Yeah.
like if you know a lot of Bukharians and you know what Bukharians look like, you'd probably see me and be like, "Oh, he's Bukharian." But if you don't, then you probably just assume I'm white, you know? So yeah, or maybe Middle
Yeah.
Eastern or something, I'm not sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
But not Central Asian, typically speaking.
Yeah,
If
you would not. Right.
would you, looking at your daughter now, if she grows up and you're talking to her and she asks about her own heritage, how would you explain, how would you explain who her cultural background is?
It's a good question. Huh. I mean, I would try to let her like
Mm,
embrace both aspects of just like, my culture and the foods
mhm,
and the connection and to spend time with my parents and dude, there's like Bukharian songs, Bukharian dances. Like I'd want her to experience and really embrace the culture. And then at the
mhm,
same time, like I would want her to do that for my wife's culture as well. Of just like really,
mhm.
I don't know what they,
How to take care.
have
Right,
some bland
absolutely.
foods. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
right,
absolutely. Yeah.
right.
Because it's an interesting experience, right? You are, like you said, you are white. I think that I don't know if the term white passing makes sense. Do you use that term or do you just say that I appear white? What's the best way to
Yeah,
describe it?
I've been using white passing just because I don't know what like a better word would
I
be,
think
but
that's the term, right?
yeah,
White passing or
exactly.
white
Right,
appearing or presenting.
right.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
all
yeah.
the terms. But yeah, so like as a Central Asian person who presents white, who is assumed to be white, do you feel like your experience is different from other people, maybe even Bacarians who might look less white?
Yeah, dude, actually, yes, I would say so. For sure, for sure. What's
Mm,
interesting also is that I think based on the way that I dress and talk also, like amongst some Bukharians, they might even be like they would be like, he's kinda like a sellout, you know? Like that kind of
oh,
vibe.
tell me more.
Yeah. Um, just like also especially since I married somebody that's not Bukharian too. Like that's also like could be a factor of just like, you're
Is that a
not like
cultural no-no in the community?
it definitely was. Definitely was. I
Mm,
think, like, sentiments are kinda shifting around it, and people are becoming
mhm,
more Americanized, and it's kind of just melting into the greater Jewish community of just like, "Okay, you're
mm,
Bukharian, like, whatever, you're just another Jew." And honestly, like, European Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews, they were like that too when they first immigrated in the earlier
mhm,
1900s, where it's like Polish and Hungarian Jews did not
mhm,
intermarry, you know what I mean? But now nobody even knows if they're
mm,
Polish or Hungarian. You know, nobody cares.
right.
It's just you're Jewish.
Yeah.
So I assume in another generation or 2, it's gonna be the same thing. You know, it's just gonna be like,
I get
whatever, you're
that.
Jewish.
And I feel
Yeah.
like that's been the case even, growing up, my background is Taiwan and
Mm,
there there's different perspectives around this, like dating and marrying outside of your community, outside of your own race. I think that there's always going to be people who will look at that with some prejudice or assumptions.
yeah.
And then there's complexities behind it because there is this element of how, when you are dating or in a relationship with somebody, especially if they're from a community that community hasn't always embraced yours so welcomely, that could be complex, right? There's so many layers to that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, that's fascinating. So,
Mhm.
yeah, wow, and what's your girlfriend now? Like, it sounds like you're in a serious relationship, right?
She's yeah, my wife.
You're married
I
now, okay, wow.
I'm terrible at wearing my wedding ring because
Dude, me too,
I'm
by the way.
always taking it off. Yeah, right. Because I'm like I always take it off. I
Yeah.
don't like wearing jewelry. We've been married for the last 5, almost 6 months now, and I
Wow,
still am
congrats.
having to remind my thank you, having to remind myself to put it back on. She is like her background is I think part Italian, part Ukrainian,
Oh,
so
wow.
she is as white as they come, and yeah. But being with her, there hasn't really been any kind of a cultural mismatch or anything like that, because I think that she really embraced, like, she started learning how to speak Mandarin on
Oh wow.
Duolingo when we started dating. And she would go to hang out with my parents on her own, and then they would
Mm.
hang out together and make food and have food together without me. And I'm like, it's so incredibly sweet, and we see that. But I'm sure that there are people that I've encountered, I'm sure that you've encountered, who have had thoughts or prejudices or assumptions, just based on how we look. That's
Right,
got to be
right, right.
one of those things that comes up. Now,
Dude, yeah, it's
before
messed up. Yeah.
before I really want to dive into this question, because I'm so curious in particular about your work with the men's therapy studio.
Thank you. Yeah. So,
So
okay, I
how did that start? Where did that go?
yeah, no problem, no problem. It's a good question. Okay. So yeshiva is kind of like a monastery, but just Jewish, right?
Uh-huh.
And to explain the context a little bit, from the morning, like 7:30 in the morning until 11 p.m. at night, it's just nonstop study of ancient text and prayers and meditate, like different philosophical meditations, literally all day. Literally, I'm telling you, like from the morning, literally to night. That's the entire schedule. And you have like an hour break for lunch and for dinner, you know?
Mm.
And it's like, that's, yeah. And breakfast, like 40 minutes. You know what I mean? So it's really
Mhm.
intense. I was
Mhm.
there and at that time in the summer, you'd get like 1 month off in the summer. And I did this kind of to learn about my own religion and go deeper. And it's been a
Mhm.
fascinating journey. I've really been grateful that I've been able to have it. So
Mhm.
during that time, also in the summers, I would go to camp and they had kind of what's called like, I don't know, I forget what the word is, but kind of like you're helping unaffiliated Jews become more affiliated. Kind of like proselytizing, exactly. You're not converting anybody. It's just people that want to learn more about their religion. Like they would come to either like the camp or a study group or whatever. And yeah, and you had older guys also, and I just was very, very good at connecting with people and this was usually like boys camps and stuff. And like I
Mhm.
would just be very close with the teens. And at this point also it's like I'm 18 to like 22 or
Mhm.
at that point
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
connecting with these teens and young guys, it was always just like a vibe and it felt very real where I could talk to them about something that was like much deeper and meaningful.
Mhm.
And I really connected with that and just since that point I've always just loved working with young men basically. And
Mhm.
uh it just naturally transitioned. Like I knew I wanted to be a therapist, so I started my master's. I originally thought I was gonna become a rabbi. So the great thing about yeshiva is that they give you an undergraduate degree. So I was able to do that and then do my master's from there. And then I just knew I wanted to work with that population. So at first, my first job out of school was I was a school counselor, which was awesome. Best job
Mhm.
ever. And then once I got my license, I started private practice. And I've just been doing that ever since. And it's just the population I love working with. It's like, it feels very meaningful to me. And I also think that there's a crisis, or at least everyone talks about a crisis of masculinity in Western culture, right? Like,
Hmm.
so I thought, like, this is perfect. I love working with young men and there's a niche
Yeah.
here. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now
Uh,
you mentioned that there's a crisis. This is a term we've definitely heard.
yeah.
There's a loneliness
Right.
epidemic. There's a
Yes.
male, masculinity epidemic, and we are seeing all of these different various things that are popping up around it. And you mentioned specifically Western culture. Do you feel like there is a difference, or there is a particular experience in the Western culture that we're seeing that with, or perhaps even deeper? Actually, let's start with there. Do you see
Yeah,
that as
sure.
being a more Western experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think it's more of like a modern experience, right? Like,
Mm.
I don't know, 50 years ago, nobody was struggling with, I think, gender roles or anything like that. I think it was very clear. And I think also coming from this Bukharian background that I did, there were very clear gender roles. Like my
Mm.
father went and worked and did all that, and my mother also took care of kids, and my sisters took care of us as well. And like
Mhm.
it was just very
Mhm.
clear. Um, and I think somebody growing up in that environment maybe has similar beliefs to on gender, and I think that actually makes it very tough for queer individuals in the community because like very often they're uh like honestly it's almost like they're hidden, and that's
Mhm.
tough. So I don't know
Mhm.
what's really causing it per se. i think
Mm.
I think almost like we were talking about like this matrix earlier of just like there's societal rules and expectations, and
Mhm.
in a way like society is waking up to the idea that like gender is kind of like it's a construct at the end of the day with regards to like the roles that are expected and given.
Mhm,
But even if
mhm,
that's true, like I don't know what the right response is. Like maybe it's better to just fall like keep those constructs and in line anyways, or maybe it's a better idea to break it. And I think that's ultimately like a very individual decision. And so it's really complicated,
mhm.
you know?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is, right? I think
Right.
especially now for I look at a lot of younger people, and I do feel like they are given, definitely more freedom, societally speaking, in
Yeah.
how they can approach and choose what paths that they wanna take, or more identify who they are truly underneath that at birth in their own discovery, that self-discovery. And that self-discovery brings about more ease of access and understanding, but I think that also makes it more complex
Mm,
because there's just so many more different types of expectations that we have to
right.
hold in
Yeah.
this generation now. Like,
Yeah.
yes, like there's definitely harms in previous
Mhm.
generation where if you were somebody who didn't fit into those gender identities or gender roles, then you were either outcast or you were forced to, remain stigmatized and hide that part of yourself. But
Exactly. Yeah.
now that we're talking about it, I almost feel like there's also more complexity and more confusion around, well, how do I approach it? Do you have
Yeah.
any clients who you've experienced working with these kind of topics that, how do you approach that with them?
Yeah. So I do. I don't want to say details about like
No, of course.
people's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
experiences.
In generalizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, generally. So honestly, it okay. So there's a man named Carl Rogers who I think he was from the 1930s. Maybe I'm wrong, but early American psychologist, post Freud. Um, but very early on in the psychotherapy field, he developed the humanistic branch of therapy,
Mhm.
of just like, I'm not the expert as the therapist. I'm really here to reflect the client's the expert, right? So really being present, having empathy and reflecting. And that really is so much of the base of a lot of different issues. Like like having that approach of really, listening first, believing that you have exactly what you need in order to get through your challenges. And I'm here to really help you reflect and create a nurturing environment where you
Mhm.
can bring that out naturally. So it's really the same thing. It's like working with the client that might have a gender issue. It's really just like, well, hearing their ideas of like what how they think they should feel and like, well, what does that bring up in you when you act in that way? Is that like helping you or not? And like really helping them reflect and they find their own path in that. And this is the funny thing, man. There are no rules. There really aren't. And this is the thing
Mhm.
though. I think if you have certain ideas of gender expectations, such as like let's say they're traditional, so it's like you want to be working, and then maybe you want your partner to be maybe working part time, but mostly taking care of the house chores, like meaning
Mhm.
or whatever. You could hire help also, but meaning raising the children and stuff like that. That would be their primary role. If that's something that you want, and you go into a relationship that doesn't have that, you won't be happy. You want to
Mhm.
be able to find somebody that will have your ideas of gender roles. And the same thing is true vice versa. Like if you wanted somebody that's going to be working and not really such a child person, then and you marry somebody that does want that, then you're gonna be miserable too. It's like it's just like you have to be able to like agree on whatever the set of standards you want to set for your household. Does that make sense?
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be a personal discovery journey that
Exactly.
each person has to take on.
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
If you could, uh shout out one message to all, let's say it doesn't have to be Central Asian Americans, but just all Asian Americans across the United
Yeah.
States, what would that message be?
That is such a good question. Hmm. I'd really say like believe in yourself, take your shot. I feel like the
Mm,
Asian American experience is people that are extremely talented and extremely smart and extremely
mm,
invested in many ways. And it's just I think there's a lot of afraid to do something. And that
mm,
that to me is very sad, where it's just like believe in yourself, like you could do it. And you
mhm,
wrote about this in your book too,
mm,
quite a bit. And it's like have fun with it. Just do it. Throw it at
mhm,
the wall. Like just see what sticks. Like you are probably much more talented and capable than and smart than you think you are, or giving yourself credit for. And it's like you don't have to be perfect, you know. It's like that's
mhm,
definitely advice that I think I've been heeding, and it was something that I needed to hear, and I'm glad that I took it when I did, you know.
mm. I love that. And yeah, it's such a simple message, but honestly, it carries so much truth behind it because it is through the struggle, it is through the fears that we hold. And it's like they say, right? Like, feel the fear and do it anyway, right?
Exactly.
Experience it,
Yeah.
and carrying it. That's what true courage is to allow yourself to be seen. And oh boy, it's an easy thing to talk about. And I think for every single living human being, it is a universal experience that we just have to go through time and time and time again. We have to face that experience, face that fear, and step courageously into the world.
It's brilliantly said. Brilliantly said, John. Yeah.
Um, it's so wonderful to hear this perspective and to hear from, like I said, we don't really get enough people who are from Central Asia to speak up about their Asian American stories and experiences. Thank you so much for sharing. If people want to find out more about you or join your practice, how do they go about finding you?
Yeah, if you Google Gabi Koyenov, Gabikoyenov, I'll come up. My practice will come up also. The men's therapy studio. And yeah, check out the podcast. John will be joining me, and so I'm excited.
I'm
Yeah,
excited. I can't wait.
of course.
Thank you
Yeah,
once again for your time. People, go check out Gabi's stuff. We'll make sure that all those links are in the show notes. Listen to his podcast, explore his work, and continue the work of diving deeper and finding yourself. Thank you once again for your time today, Gabi. Thank you for joining us all.
of course, John. Thank you. Thank you for having me.